Hello, Peppers. Wow, this is exciting, isn't it? We should have recorded this about 5 hours ago. Dr. Dave, I don't know what's happened to him. He's probably dead. He's 2020, he's probably off with the aliens. I have just lost complete contact with reality. I don't know what's going on. I just know that we record the latest show ever. The Hand of God, he's done. He's had it. And Bill Wyman, the real Bill Wyman, not the fake Bill Wyman from Rolling Stone. So it isn't even his name. What's his real name?
Bill Perks.
Bill Perks.
Bill Wyman of the Rolling Stones. He was born Bill Perks, William Perks.
I can see why he changed his name to Bill Wyman, which is a really cool name,
it's a cool
unlike
name, isn't it?
Bill Perks.
Yeah.
The real Bill Wyman was on the drum and was so kind to step in and to just wait around for hours while we finished making our show. It was hours. And to step in for Dr. Dave again, thank you so much, Bill Wyman, for this. I really do
totally
appreciate
my pleasure.
it.
And again, I feel bad for the people who aren't getting Dr. Dave, who knows a thing or two about a thing or two.
Well, you know a thing or three. Take that, Dr. Dave. Got him. Now we are, of course, coming to you not from 2SER today. We're coming to you from a random location, which could be anywhere. It could be anywhere in Australia. I'm not going to give you any clues, and it's definitely not a place that we're not allowed to be. It's somewhere in Australia. It's not 2SER. Unfortunately, 2SER is not open at this time of the night. So we've just gone to the first open location that we are definitely allowed to be in. I apologize for the preparation as well, because there is none. We were going to do something and everything's gone out the window. So I've just got my notes. I'm just going to do my best to just ford our way through with my notes, which haven't been drafted in any kind of form. Normally, I actually do preparation for this podcast. I know you're going to find it hard to believe, but I do. And this time, yeah.
Did you remember Drudge Report back in the day?
Yeah.
And you put the police
yes,
thing on the
emergency siren.
That's what's going on.
That
tonight,
is what's going on.
People should take that into account.
There is an emergency siren both across America and inside my brain. And so let's start off with the story. We all know what the story is. Donald Trump has COVID. Bill Wyman, take it away.
Well, I just think I think we're all going to have a collective journalistic stroke. I don't know what else can happen. Remember, we had Ruth. Remember, 2 weeks ago I was here and we were having a meltdown because Ruth Bader Ginsburg had passed away, which blew a hole in the presidential election, which had a hole blown in it the week before with the Woodward book, if you recall. And then there was a hole blown in it the week before that with that bombshell Atlantic story about Donald Trump calling military people suckers and losers. And then there's 4 or 5 things that happened that I'm completely forgetting about.
Can I tell you, every time one of these stories breaks, I read in a blog reader, right? I use a Feedly reader, and every time, I normally have about 300 to 400 stories a day to read in my reader, right? Whenever one of those stories breaks, just adds 300 stories immediately, right? So Ruth Bader Ginsburg, when she died, I got at one point in time about 650 articles behind. And I spent weeks catching up. You know I finally caught up? Last night. Now, this bloody thing's happened. I'm going to open my Feedly reader. I'm going to be behind by about 20,000 articles. It's done.
It's very, very difficult.
It is.
And there's a number of things to talk about. And one thing that I think we should say is that this is a serious thing where a serious person, I don't want to say a serious person, but where a real person has a serious disease. So does his wife. And we should all say we hope the president remains asymptomatic and nothing happens. And we wish the best for him. Absolutely. The First Lady, Hope Hicks, and everyone around them. Full stop. And then let's also say, but also recognize that he's the person who has endangered all their lives. And so he deserves a little bit of smackdown, which I'm sure he'll get tonight.
Well, to be fair, I know you just were fair just then, but to be also fair, we don't know how he got it yet. Like, he might have got it by acting like a dick. Like, he maybe he got it in a way that he could have gotten anyway. We just don't know. Like,
okay, that's a fair point.
Like for instance, Hope Hicks, right? Hope Hicks, if she gave it to him, which we don't know, maybe he gave it to her. Maybe they both got it from someone else, right? From the same person.
Are you talking about Kimberly?
I'm not talking about Kimberly yet. You can bring her
'cause
up
it
if you
seems
want.
like that's who you're talking about.
No. I'm just saying. I'm not making any accusations. I'm just saying we don't know. If he caught from Hope Hicks, there's every chance. I'm sure you've seen the footage on loop on the cable news networks of them walking up the flight of stairs onto Air Force One, where Hope Hicks has her hand on the railing, and then seconds later, Donald Trump has his hand on the same railing. Now, if he caught it from her that way, that's a way anyone could have caught it. He takes tests, she takes tests, everyone's taking tests around the White House. It would be so easy to slip up in that tiny way, and bang, you got COVID. And
but let me give you an alternative way it could have happened.
There's plenty.
And I don't know if everyone had seen this story, but during the Cleveland debate, there were rules that were set down for the audience members at the debate. And maybe you talked about this on the podcast already, but apparently, according to numerous reports, the Joe Biden side of the debate audience, everyone wore masks. On the Trump side, nobody wore masks. And this was a minor scandal at the time because those, again, were the rules that were put in place. And of course, they were completely flouted. There's a really good chance, or there's also a chance that that's where it was all. And the whole point about wearing masks is that you stop other people from getting it. It helps to some extent prevent you from getting it. And if you do get it, it lessens the severity of it, I think tests have shown. So, so you're being very fair. It could have happened in a completely random way, but there's also any number of ways that.
And by the way, let me just say, there is one thing which we know for sure was irresponsible, leaving aside the things that are publicly, obviously irresponsible over the last few months. One thing that's definitely irresponsible is the fact that Hope Hicks has felt sick for apparently days and days, and they didn't announce that. That someone from the media found out, and that's how it got out that Hope Hicks had COVID. Now, how many people has Hope Hicks come into contact with?
Right.
And she may have given it to someone. They really should announce those kinds of things. And I know they don't want to for PR reasons, but there's some things that are more important than political campaigns.
It's true. Yeah. And can I remind you one other thing, that this, remember, it goes way back to the start of this, that the president and his entourage and everyone around him has been completely careless and disrespectful, I think you can say, about all these precautions. And one of my little wry tweets from about 6 months ago is that what the Democrats should be doing is calling it the Mar-a-Lago virus, because there were numerous stories early on that said they thought there were some spreader events at Mar-a-Lago early on where once they knew it. And I thought in response to China virus, we should have all called it the Mar-a-Lago virus, because that's the way this thing has been spread. And we've seen that happen in Tulsa. And some of his other rallies, they've actually tracked outbreaks to these things.
My question for you is, given what we're talking about here, my question for you is, do you feel that this changes Trump's supporters' view of COVID at all?
Well, let's really hope so. And if you remember, I said last time that I'd been living in Arizona for a while, so I kind of saw what, quote unquote, real America acted and thought, and just things that just made your head explode on a daily basis. And during COVID, I mean, all of this sort of became writ large and also dangerous. You have older people. You have a lot of people who are much more vulnerable to it. And so let's really hope that at a certain point, there's a certain level of self-preservation and intelligence where people go, yeah, right, that some of this, it's uncool to wear masks, it's a liberal thing, or that whole issue of thinking they're owning the liberals by not wearing a mask, which is permeating red state America. I hope that gets better. And boy, when you look at the map at the worst states in the union right now, have you seen that map?
I had a little stat last week that in terms of per capita, this is last week, I haven't checked up what's changed since then, but in terms of per capita new cases over the previous week, as of last week, okay, so over 7 days, new cases on a per capita basis, the top 17 states went to Trump in 2016. The top 17 states.
And according to the latest things that I ran, that I just noticed, of the top 10, I think that Wisconsin was in there, which technically I think went for him.
That went to Trump
in
2016?
But Wisconsin is the only what you call a non-red state right now, and the rest are all red states. And it's tragic, and cases are going up. Yeah. Arizona was actually at the forefront of this because Arizona, I think, was one of the most dangerous places in the world for COVID about 3 months ago. Yeah. And fortunately, that's waned. But even now, the cases of it are much higher than they were before the ridiculous spread that started specifically because Arizona's Republican governor and legislature started stopping the cities from mandating masks. So you didn't just have this opting out, you had this assertive, incredibly reckless and dangerous preemption of city rules trying to stop this. So it was incredibly responsible.
Well,
and reckless.
on that note, even now, I'm skipping ahead a little bit here. See, I haven't prepared very well. But Florida has just lifted all restrictions. Like a couple of days ago, they lifted all restrictions. Florida, for those who aren't keeping track, is the number one state for deaths per day at the moment. They had 129 deaths yesterday. It was the most deaths in America. I mean, Florida's got a big population, but it was the most deaths in America yesterday, 129. Their positivity test rating, in terms of like the percentage of tests that come back positive, you want it to be below 5%. It was a couple of days ago, 12%. And they've lifted all restrictions. So the local governments can limit and regulate businesses, but they're not allowed to close businesses because of coronavirus concerns. And cities and counties aren't able to impose any restrictions without an economic and health justification that they provide to the state government, which will then give them permission. Yeah. So that's happening now.
And just to put this in context, like, America is a federation of these states, and there's a big thing about states' rights in America, which has a legitimate political.
Yeah, I'm into states' rights. Yeah.
You're really not.
No, I'm a libertarian. You might not know that. You don't know that.
No. What you don't understand is that in America, the idea of states' rights is a code name for
racism. No. I'm not into inverted commas states' rights. I actually believe in just actual states having rights. Hopefully, they don't exercise those rights to be racist assholes. But
what I'm saying, there's a legitimate political. That's what I'm saying. There's a legitimate political justification for that. However. But you'll understand that in a state like Arizona and these red states that are the loudest, screaming about it when it comes to, and granted, a city in relation to a state is different than a state in relation to the rest of the United States. However, you'd think they'd say, cities' rights. That, hey, if Phoenix and Maricopa County want to mandate masks, that's fine for them.
Yeah.
But instead, no, they Bigfoot them in those cases.
Exactly. As a legitimate non-hypocritical believer in states' rights, I can tell you the principle behind it is local control is better than large control from a gigantic body. Then when you have local control, you have a better idea of what's going on. So the principle applies even more so to cities. Yeah. Like if you believe in that, which I do, then you should back cities in controlling themselves and municipalities controlling themselves where possible. Like the smaller the unit, the more likely they are to know what they're doing in their unit. Obviously, the bigger the unit, the more economies of scale. Let's not have a philosophy debate here, but you're right. It's hypocritical. But okay, what I was going to say was, look, I hope that this is a wake up call for Trump supporters who are skeptical about COVID. But to be honest, I mean, we don't know what's going to happen yet. Trump may remain asymptomatic, and he might, in a week and a half's time, tread around like Hercules. He might just rip off his shirt and just start pumping the biceps, and he might start talking about hydroxychloroquine all of a sudden again. And he might say, I beat it with HCQ, and it could be a disaster. We don't know what's going to happen. And even if he gets very sick, let's leave death out of the equation. Even if he just gets sick, hospitalized or whatever, then that might feed 100 conspiracy theories. Like my sad, cynical view of the world is that when motivated reasoning collides with reality, reality loses almost every time. Yeah. People come up with some justification, and it's...
Though I think, to be honest, we're not talking about people. We're talking about Russian trolls and people just stirring up trouble on the internet.
I reckon there's people there as well, though.
Some. But just to be honest, I think that it's pretty well established that a vast part of it comes from those sorts of things that just try to stir up this. Yeah. Because we were talking about this on the drum a little earlier when the whole issue is like, is America a polarized place, or is it, and it's true, we are polarized, right? But when it comes to the safety, like dealing with coronavirus, there's really not an argument about it. We all know we need to shut down, we need to wear masks, we need to stop the spread, we need to do contact tracing to trace things down. Everyone basically agrees with that. The only person really who doesn't I mean, almost literally, is Donald Trump. And so he's kind of stirring people up about that. And they really don't know any better on whether they want to own the libs or for whatever reason. Like, it's really not an argument. Like, it's not like two sides are disagreeing. It's one side are trying to stop people from dying, and there's a crisis or there's a chaos agent in the mix that's doing this. And so I guess you could say we're polarized, but that's really not quite precise about what's going on, right?
I think you raise an interesting point as well when you distinguish between people and people online. Because, I mean, leaving aside Russian mischief or whatever, I think people online are very different people to what they are offline. I think that people online forget that they're dealing with other human beings. They start to enjoy owning people a lot more than they do in the real world. Yeah. And I feel like, I'm paranoid about even coughing these days. I feel like that the fact that there are mischief makers out there, and we know that, not just other countries, but trolls who are just having fun, who don't believe what they're saying at all. They're just trying to stir up other people for fun. That they're out there, that makes people have distrust when they hear someone with an extreme view and they say, well, there's no way that person could be for real. And if that person does happen to be for real, then that makes people even more polarized and it spreads the hatred even more. So it's a terrible. Anyway, we're getting way off topic. Do you have anything else to say about the COVID situation before? I mean, Trump and COVID before we move on.
Do you want to talk just a little bit about what it means legally in America in terms of what happens if he gets really sick? What happens if he gets so sick he can't run?
Sure.
Are we going to move on to that?
Look, we talked about it on the Friday show, and but by all means.
Just briefly, I think the way to think about it on an initial basis, just so people understand what the reality is, and anything can happen after that. And of course, people will be stirring up trouble. But my understanding, I'm not a constitutional law expert and stuff like this, but as I understand it, this is not America's problem. It's not an election problem in any way, shape, or form. It's a Republican Party problem. They have a candidate. The candidate happens to get sick. Yeah. Like, that has nothing to do with the Constitution or anything like this. And there's mechanisms in place to deal with it. So, for example, if for some reason he gets hit by a car and dies, the Republican Party has regulations. They all get together and they say, okay, who should replace him? It would presumably be Mike Press. And so, just so people understand, that's the basic baseline, that the issue right now, to the extent it is, it's the Republican Party. We're having this election, and people should also know that the American system is 50 different elections in all these different states, and you're actually casting votes for these so-called electors who, about a month after the election, get together and cast their vote. And there's all these mechanisms that the electors, if someone dies, they can vote for someone else. And so there's these mechanisms to take it into place, but I don't quite see legally how this could have any actual effect on the election, which is going to take place in 50 different states. I mean, you can't have a candidate. I think I was saying to you beforehand, if one candidate says, I want to play Russian roulette, and people say, don't do that, and he does, and he shoots himself, that's not America's problem. That's the Republican Party's problem, that they nominated someone who was such an idiot. Yeah,
but even if they're just run over by a bus, like you say, I mean, John made the point on the Friday show. He said, okay, let's say they pass a bill, which they would need to do, to put the election back, say 3 weeks to let Trump recover. Okay, and then let's say Biden gets sick straight after that. Are they going to put it off again? No, it's ridiculous. It's just, the bottom line is that, I agree with you, legally, this is the Republicans' problem. Now, as it turns out, they're fortunate that they're up against Joe Biden, because his whole thing is decency. And we know what he's going to do. I mean, this might be famous last words. I might regret this in a few days' time when this is on, when this has gone out and Joe Biden doesn't do this. But I think Joe Biden clearly is going to suspend campaigning while Donald Trump can't campaign. I think, number one, that suits him. But number two, that's his whole ethos. That's the way. That's how he's pitching himself to the voters. I am the person who is reaching out and being considerate. That's his persona. If he just kept on campaigning, well, so much as he is campaigning, if he kept on doing whatever he's doing, then I think people would resent it, and I think that would backfire. So I think he's going to. I mean, he might not do nothing. He might just limit himself to whatever Trump does. Like, if Trump does Zoom calls, then Biden will do Zoom calls. Whatever it is, I don't think Trump's going to be a disadvantage because he is up against Joe Biden. And I think that's
you bring up a really interesting point, because I when you first said that, I'm like, why would he do that? And then the other thing, you have to understand that there's like hundreds of millions of dollars of political advertising going on online, on
course.
TV stations,
And they can
across
still run
Florida and
ads.
things
They can
like that.
both run ads. That's fine.
Yeah, but that's what the campaign is. And so the question is like, so if I'm a senior citizen in Tallahassee, Florida, and I keep seeing attack ads for Donald Trump, against Donald Trump from the Biden campaign, does that turn me off or not? Or, but I really could be wrong. But
That's a great question, though.
that's what the issue is.
Do you pull the attack ads? You can still run ads.
Yeah.
But do you pull the attack ads? Do you make the ads more positive about you rather than negative about your opponent?
Yeah.
Because I don't know if people can feel sympathetic.
And
we'll
people
see.
should also know that under the American system, you have all these non-campaign political action committees. You know, Bloomberg alone, right, has committed $100 million to Florida. So the question, and legally, they're not allowed to coordinate.
Yes, of course.
So you have also all these different actors going on. So I don't know how to go. But I'll tell you something. I really could be wrong because people in the media always live in a bubble. But my sense of America right now is just like, let's get this goddamn election over with. Yeah. We don't care. You got coronavirus, that's great. We don't care if you have the mumps, the measles. We don't care what the hell you're doing. Yeah. Let's move on to November 2nd. So I kind of think that people just want the clock to run out at this point.
On that note, let's move on. Let's move on to the debate, because even though there's almost certainly not going to be a second debate,
yeah,
it was pretty big, the debate, and the election campaign does still exist at this point in time. We talked a bit about that on the Friday show, which you can go and watch on Facebook or on iView if you're interested. Facebook.com/ABC Planet America. Let's start with the bit that everyone's been talking about, which is, obviously Mr. Interrupty, Trump, which kind of dominated a bit. Even the Republicans were saying he went too far. Chris Christie, who's helped him with his preparation, said, quote, I think on the Trump side, it was too hot. Listen, you come in and decide you want to be aggressive, and that's the right thing to be aggressive, but that was too hot. And,
that was the Republican talking point. Like because after the debate, I went through everything. Every channel had the Trump person saying he was a little too hot.
A little too hot.
A little too hot.
A little too hot. It was definitely too hot. Like actually, sorry.
Dana Bash said that in her reporting, it took the Trump campaign several days to say to the president, we think you overdid it. He said, I think I did great. And it actually took him 2 or 3 days before he started absorbing the coverage, even on Fox. And he goes, uh-oh.
I've got a clip to demonstrate what I'm talking about with this, actually, in the too hot thing. I actually felt that if Donald Trump had been a bit smarter, his transparent attempt to rattle Joe Biden worked. He did rattle Joe Biden. Joe Biden didn't know what to do. And he had him on the ropes. Trump had Joe Biden on the ropes a number of times and then just kept talking. And Joe Biden didn't have to say anything. He just sat there being rattled while Donald Trump filibustered himself. And then Chris Wallace would step in and go, okay, enough of this crap, let's move on. And it happened several times. I've got an example of it coming up soon. But he just self-sabotaged in such a massive way. I've got a personal story which I'll tell very, very quickly. I used to work on the Chases War and everything, as you know, Bill. You've just been looking at YouTube clips of it. And we used to go these current affairs shows. I don't know if you know about the current affairs shows in Australia. They don't exist so much anymore. These really terrible tabloid current affairs shows. Current affair now is like Pulitzer-winning stuff compared to Today Tonight 10 years ago. It was so bad. Anyway, and we were making fun of them all the time. At one point in time, because we were messing around, we broke into their office and we snuck in to interview the host. And we were just having fun, and they did not have fun at all. They did not enjoy themselves. They were not having fun. They basically imprisoned us. They got their security guards out, surrounded us, said, you're not allowed to leave. We've called the police. And I said, well, we want to go. That's false imprisonment. I'm a law student. I know these things. And they said, we want to hear from your lawyers, please. And so we called up the ABC lawyers, and they said, yeah, we'll get back to you. And they just left us hanging. While we're doing that,
left you hanging.
Well, yeah, while we're doing that, they just pulled out all their cameras. They'd honestly, 5 cameras on us, just all around at every angle, clearly trying to intimidate us. They didn't need 5 cameras. And their absolute number one attack dog reporter came in and just drilled us for about 2 hours. Just drilled us and drilled us and drilled us. And like he just asked endless questions for 2 hours, right? And these shows, they can twist your answer into anything. If they've got you for 2 hours, you are fucked, pardon the French. And I knew that, like, and even though I was like an expert at processing these current affairs shows, I knew exactly the angles they were going to run. They were going to try and run they can dish it out, but they can't take it. They're on the taxpayer's expense. They're private school boys. I knew all the angles they were going to try and do. So I was just trying to avoid them all. But some of them are contradictory, so it's very hard to avoid them all at once. And he had me for 2 hours just going and going and going. I would have been stuffed, except their producer is a crazy man and was there red in the face, spitting at us, literally spitting, talking over his reporter. Every time his reporter had us on toast, he'd go, yeah, and you're fuckwits and you're dickheads, etc. Like that. Like just Tourette's. Their producer had just had Tourette's. And he destroyed his own interviewers' attempts to set us up. And I was saved over and over again by his lack of control. That was Joe Biden and Donald Trump during the debate. His lack of control was saving Joe Biden over and over again.
Such a great point. Such a great point. Yeah. And I think the dirty little secret of that debate is that Joe Biden actually did very poorly. There was a couple great moments where he looked into the camera, but he flubbed 3 or 4 important questions.
Yep.
And the first 10 or 15 minutes, he just simply wasn't good at all. I mean, he just got no good lines off at all. And there was one interesting thing, and this is one of my pet issues in the campaign, is that I don't understand why the Democrats don't say, we support the police. The police are there for us all the time. Of course we support the police. They're part of our community. They put themselves in line for us. They've been poorly trained. It does them a disservice. It does the community a disservice. We're going to fix things and make things better. Nobody in America disagrees with that statement. Joe Biden has never been able to say that for some reason.
Black people don't disagree with that statement. The polls are overwhelmingly supportive of the good police.
Of course.
Yeah.
And he actually got that line off in the debate, but it kind of got snowed under by Trump. And I hope, I shouldn't say I hope, but you'd think that people in there would say, boy, that line tests off the chart, that he should be saying that and everything. So that I thought was his best moment, but Trump was very effective in overwhelming him when he did do stuff like that.
It's funny you mentioned that because I did not know you were going to say that. And that is the part of the debate which I have highlighted where Trump is a classic example of where everything went wrong in that debate. I'll play it to you and then I'll just talk about it. Here we go.
Policing.
Look, what I support is the police having the opportunity to deal with the problems they face. And I'm totally opposed to defunding the police officers. As a matter of fact, local police, the only one defunding in his budget calls for a $400 million cut in local law enforcement assistance. They need more assistance. They need, when they show up for a 9/11 call, to have someone with them as a psychologist or psychiatrist to keep them from having to use force and be able to talk people down. We have to have community policing like we had before, where the officers get to know the people in the communities. That's when crime went down. It didn't go up, it went down. And so we have to be engaged.
That's not what they're talking about, Chris. That's not what they're talking about. He's talking about defunding the police.
That is not true.
He doesn't have any law support.
Look,
he has no law enforcement support.
That's not true.
Almost nothing.
Look.
Roy, who do you have? Name one group that supports you. Name one group that came out and supported you. Go ahead. Think. We have time.
We don't have time to do anything.
Think
all right.
Name one law enforcement group that came out and supported you.
Gentlemen, I think I'm going to take back the moderator's role, and I want to get to another subject.
Okay, so let me tell you what you just saw there. Let me take you through it because this summed up the whole debate. Number one, Biden has prepared. He's got a reasonable point he wants to make. He's making it relatively well. He's not stunning. He's not Obama 08, but he's making the point, right? He doesn't get to finish. Trump comes over the top, changes the topic. So he derails the attempt at a constructive discussion, right? Trump just feels his way around with his instincts till he finds an attack line that lands. He just basically just blathers until he finds an attack line that lands, which was he found by accident, the one about how many law enforcement agencies support you.
Yeah.
Right. He immediately recognizes, oh yeah, I've got blood here. So he just repeats it over and over again. Biden clearly, I mean, it's not relevant, the talking point, but it's close enough, as far as debates go. Biden clearly isn't quick enough on his feet to respond. He doesn't know how to respond. He just starts going, And the thing is, Biden had an answer. He actually had an answer because only 2 weeks earlier, he was endorsed by 175 law enforcement officers, right? So if he was quick enough on his feet and not just going through the Rolodex in his head trying to come up with whatever he'd prepared, he could have answered that, bang, like that. And he could have probably turned it on Trump.
Right.
But anyway, but Trump has him on the ropes. Trump should then shut up and let Biden answer.
Yeah.
He doesn't shut up. He keeps on going, talking. Chris Wallace feels sorry for Biden, who is just because at this point in time, it's just Trump just talking over this crosstalk. It's a mess. Chris Wallace is going, well, this isn't going anywhere. I've got to move in. So he then saves Biden, which isn't his job as the moderator, and they then move on. And that happened over and over again, where Biden was trying to have a constructive chat. Trump was trying to stop a constructive chat. Trump found his way to a clever pivot that then became an attack. Biden couldn't cope with it. And then Trump just killed the opportunity he created. And then Wallace saved Biden as they moved on to the next topic.
I think that's so true. And it even got worse because every time Wallace tried to calm him down, Trump would immediately turn his glare to Wallace and start arguing with him.
Yes.
Like it was just insane sometimes.
Yeah.
He'd be arguing with Wallace and Biden. He'd be haranguing both of them at the same time, which is quite a talent.
It really is. Yeah. It really is. I got another theory, by the way, I want to throw out there because there's a lot of talk about the new rules. Now, we might not even have another debate now. We don't know. But if we do, maybe if we have the third debate, if it becomes a second debate, if Trump has the minimum time COVID, we could potentially have the third debate. I don't think they need new rules. I think the problem was the old rules didn't have clarity. And let me explain what I'm talking about. What the rules, Wallace explained at the beginning. 2 minutes, 2 minutes to one person and 2 minutes to the other person and then discussion. That's what he said at the beginning. Okay. So is that discussion for the whole section? Or is it just till Wallace asks the next question? And then when Wallace asks the next question, is it 2 minutes and 2 minutes and then discussion? Or what? Because sometimes he just asked 3 or 4 questions in a row. It was completely ambiguous when the discussion was meant to happen because during discussion, interrupting each other is fine. It's supposed to be open slather. You're supposed to not interrupt each other during the 2 minutes. But when was the 2 minutes? Was it just at the start? See, to me, it was complete ambiguity.
Yeah, the whole thing was and you know the word the number one word that was used about it, and literally by Dana Bash live on CNN,
yes,
that it was a shit show.
The shit show.
And it was a shit show on so many reasons. And everything about it, the minute Wallace started saying that at the beginning, I was thinking, discussion? What does that mean? I don't even understand where that came from. And then this whole thing where he said he wasn't going to fact check people and that he was going to be invisible.
Yeah,
and it's like, that's not what's supposed to happen. The whole point is we want you there because we know these politicians are clowns. And the whole point is that here's one time when they're going to be and a thing where they can get pinned down on national TV, and the guy, Wallace should be saying something. You didn't answer the question. You need to, all that kind of stuff. And everyone at Fox News, I think Fox News is such a pernicious influence in America right now. And once in a great while, someone like Wallace asks an intelligent question. Everyone says, oh, he's such a great interviewer. And he just barely did his job once or twice. And everyone fawns over him. And there was no reason to think he'd be any good. And he just completely took himself out of any possibility of this is, America, we joke about this, but America is at this extraordinary position right now. And I actually think everything's working the way it's supposed to. America has a right to elect a complete bozo as president.
Yeah, that's democracy.
It just does.
Yeah.
And then most people in America, I think the polls show, realize that a mistake was made and they're working to rectify it. All that said, you have a president who's done these extraordinary things that we forget about. I mean, we're not even talking about the most important things in the world, which is Russian disinformation, Russia and our influences, the hollowing out, I think I mentioned last time, of all these extraordinary institutions in America, like the State Department, all these important things. And then you have a president who lies, who doesn't take responsibility and all these other things. And here was a time where finally there was someone who could pin him down on national TV and ask these hard questions. And he totally took a pass.
Yeah, look, I have to say that I'm more of a fan of Christopher Wallace than you are. That's okay. Different strokes, different folks. That's fine. But I was not at all impressed with him during this debate. Number one, I mean, look, I understand him wanting to start off hands off. I understand that. But once again, I felt like the rules were not clear. I agree with you. Where there is grey, politicians will always encroach, and Trump especially will encroach. So you can't leave grey. You got to be black or white. You be very, very clear with those rules. But I felt like Wallace basically went from 0 to 10 with his moderation, where he was almost overcompensating. By the time he finally said, "I've got to crack down on Trump," he was almost babysitting Biden. He was jumping in there, or just constantly. And that, for instance, that clip I played, he let Trump go for ages, and then just when Trump got to the point where something interesting might have happened, that's when he jumped in and said, right, that's the end of the segment, which was very strange. He did that over and over again. And I think he was just trying to put the genie back in the bottle a lot during that debate. And it made him seem biased to both sides. Both sides walked out saying, wow, he did a terrible job. Yeah. And I think that's part of the problem.
Yeah, I think that's really, really true. And the other thing is that we want, even an idiot like Trump, we want him to direct tough questions at someone like Biden. That's a good feature. We want, no one's saying that Trump shouldn't be, asking Biden tough things or even being a little, I mean, Trump, that's a whole other issue, how absolutely disgusting Trump was in talking to Biden on so many levels. But the whole point about running for president is you want their feet put to the fire. It's totally great to be harassed by the other person in a debate. Biden's a big boy. He should be able to handle that.
He has to be president. Yeah.
But the kind of the way that Trump was acting, and some of the, we're not even talking about some of the things he said, the stuff about Beau and Hunter Biden was just unbelievable, despicable. To me, Jonah, I thought one of the worst moments was that thing where he goes, "You're not smart. You went to Delaware State. Don't ever say you're smart." Like, I just think, who thinks that is anyone? I mean, you want to talk about overcompensation? Yeah, it's crazy. So this reminds me, we were talking about the information people get from the internet, stuff like this. Living in Arizona, I don't want to mention any names, okay? Because maybe we're talking about my wife's aunt. So we all have this big thing where we're sitting in to watch one of the debates between Hillary and Donald Trump. Everyone's coming over, Republicans, Democrats. Everyone's here to see the debate because this is America. We sit down. So this one older lady comes in, sits down, looks around the room and says, "I heard that CNN isn't even going to broadcast it." And so, like, everyone in the room was like, "We're watching CNN right now." But they, this world comes in. It's just like Trump saying he's stupid. Like, he's in this environment where he thinks it's okay to say that someone's stupid or something. And here's someone who lives in a world where CNN, a news channel, is not going to be covering the biggest news event of the year. It's just that kind of thing. And you just feel a little bit sorry for them, right? And it doesn't have to be said, but, Joe Biden was the chair of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee of the United States of America. Yeah. I mean, you can disagree with him. You can think he's evil. You can think he's dishonest, all those things. But Joe Biden is not dumb by any stretch of the imagination. I mean, Trump's kind of dumb, but, he became president. You have to respect that, right? But and
you have to respect that Joe Biden was the chair of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee.
That you just don't get to do that unless you're a pretty substantive person.
Yeah. What I was going to add into that is that, just to add to your point, it's not just that Trump thought that was a cool thing to do, to be going, "You're stupid," to Joe Biden. And like, he justified it because Joe Biden, when talking about COVID, says if he isn't smarten up and do this, we're in a lot of trouble. Like, he was using an expression, and Trump goes, "Oh, you want to talk about smart? Here we go." Yeah. And then he just unrolled his pre-prepared attacks. Right? It wasn't just that he thought it was a great thing to do. He put that up on his personal Twitter account as one of the highlights.
Wow.
That was. I don't remember how many highlights he put up. I don't think it was too many. And that was one of them, that clip. So he was really proud of that. He loved that. So that's,
wow.
So there you go. It's, let's talk about the stuff that they mentioned. You already brought up law and order. I know you wanted to talk more about the law and order issue in general. Do you want to bring that up now?
Can I just mention one thing?
Yeah, go for it.
Because I kind of have a stats nugget, I think.
Stats nugget! Go.
All it is, it's just something, because I find this interesting. I ask people in Australia and what they think about crime in the United States, okay? So crime in the United States has plummeted over the past 20 or 30 years to an extraordinary event. Now, crime in the United States based on other Western democracies like Australia or England is still at about 5 times what, and when I say crime, I mean, these are rough figures for murder and violent crime. Still probably 5 times as much as we have here in Australia or in the UK, right?
Yeah.
But it is less than half, probably 35 or 40% what it was 1980, 1990. It's this extraordinary thing. New York used to have, New York is now down to about 200 or 250 murders a year. So basically Monday through Friday in New York City, city of what, 10 million people? 1 murder Monday through Friday. That's kind of, it's reasonable. Right?
You're right. Not for Australia, but sure. Yeah. Yes.
I think it used to be 10.
Yeah. It's a lot less than it was. Yeah.
No, I mean, it's just, I mean, when you think of the police force dealing with 10 murders a day and trying to investigate them and stuff like that. And now there are a few American cities, but literally just a handful, Chicago, New Orleans, Baltimore, a couple others, where they have these rash of shootings and things like this, which is heartbreaking and terrible. But it's just, the crime in America has just been, it's one of the great things, but of course it's like a media issue. The media doesn't every day. The news shows don't say, hey, there wasn't any crime last night again. Isn't that great? You know, they focus on it. And of course, local news in America plays it up and scares older people. And for some reason, the image is still, by any standard, there's too much of it and still, but, and it's just like in Australia, what murders you do have, unfortunately, it's between criminals, which is sad, but that's part of the breaks. And then, of course, you do have this epidemic, as you do everywhere in the world, of men killing their wives and their girlfriends, which is a very terrible thing. But this thing where, you know, the sort of movie thing where you have this, I'm not being sexist, or I'm just saying this is the cliche, a beautiful woman walking down the street and being murdered. I mean, it happens incredibly rarely in the United States, like child kidnapping, which is something that almost never happens as well. So people should understand that about America. And when you know, Donald Trump talks about crime in all these cities, I'm just not sure it resonates because you just don't have that much.
I have some numbers for you to back that up. These are suburban polling in Pennsylvania. So this is polling. Pennsylvania is the critical state possibly during this election. Trump's all about the suburbs, campaign the suburbs. Okay, well, suburban men, and bear in mind, men are Trump's base, right? Suburban men, 51-49, Trump over Biden. Okay, suburban women, who, by the way, do get worried about crime at times, 41-59. Yeah. Right? Overall suburbs, 54-45, Biden. Okay, now this is where it gets interesting. Amongst likely voters today, college-educated white people support Biden 61-38. Now that includes 63-35 amongst college-educated white women, but that's not new. Like the Democrats, Hillary Clinton won a lot of college-educated white women as well. Yeah. Here's what's new. College-educated white men in 2016 backed Trump 56-39. Trump. Okay. Now, in suburban areas in Pennsylvania, they back Biden 57-42.
Those are amazing.
That's a big turnaround. Switch, yeah. Hillary won the Philadelphia suburbs by 13 points. Biden leads there currently, according to the Washington Post, by 38. In the New York Times, Trump was ahead 62-23 in the Philadelphia and Pittsburgh suburbs amongst Republicans. He had only 62% of the vote of Republicans in the Philadelphia and Pittsburgh suburbs. So it ain't resonating.
Yeah. I think that's really true. And we don't, it's very strange to me how close the polls are in some of these states. And again, I think a lot of people are worried because, of course, all these polling companies, they're trying to envision, right, what the voting pool is going to look like, right? And so I think that's the big question mark on the edge of some of these polls. But when you see figures like that, you wonder why they are as close as they seem to be.
Yeah. And the answer is, I think, because where people support him, they really support him. But anyway, I was going to say, I was going to roll through a quick couple of fact checks because I did a whole bunch of them on the Friday show. If you're interested in debate fact checks, I spend about 5 minutes on it on today's show. I'll roll through a few quick miscellaneous ones I didn't get to, just in case you're interested. about Biden supporting the Green New Deal. That was a bit of a contest, a bit of an issue because Biden, when he got confused, started saying he did support the Green New Deal only 2 minutes after he'd said he doesn't support the Green New Deal during the debate. Yeah. But conservatives noted that on Biden's website, he mentions supporting the Green New Deal. Let me actually read you what it says on his website. Biden believes the Green New Deal is a crucial framework for meeting the climate challenges we face. It powerfully captures two basic truths, which are at the core of his plan. Okay, so it's saying that he believes the Green New Deal is a crucial framework that captures two basic truths that are at the core of his plan, which is not the Green New Deal. So it's saying that he's sympathetic towards the Green New Deal, but it's not saying that that is his plan. So now they're going, aha, found it. They gotcha. But I feel like that demonstrates what we already knew, really, which is that Bernie Sanders and the Biden people have negotiated some in-between mishmash of the two different legs of the Democratic Party, and he wasn't lying. But anyway, I just throw that out there. And another thing they talked about was whether Biden called the China travel ban xenophobic. Now, what conservatives found afterwards was in response to Trump tweeting, because on the day when he said xenophobia, what the Democrats claim is that happened at the same time as the travel ban was being publicized. So he didn't even know the China travel ban was happening when he called Trump xenophobic on the day. That's what the Democrats are saying, right? Okay. Now what the conservatives are saying is that in response to Trump tweeting, this is a month later, I always treat the Chinese virus very seriously and have done a very good job from the beginning, including my very early decision to close the borders from China, against the wishes of almost all. Many lives are saved. The fake news new narrative is disgraceful and false. Biden tweeted, stop the xenophobic fear-mongering, be honest, take responsibility, do your job. Now, maybe that is evidence that he was calling the China travel ban xenophobic, or maybe he's talking about the Chinese virus term, which at that point in time was something Democrats were jumping all over, going, will you stop calling it the Chinese virus? Right. Now everyone's given up on that now. They just let them do it. Yeah. But there was a period there for about 2-3 weeks where they're going, that's so racist. Stop calling it the Chinese virus. Yeah. I think that tweet was in response to that. We don't know. We can't read their mind. But I just want to throw that out there. And also, this is another attack on Biden, which, sorry about that, which he which I thought was an inaccurate attack. He said, you've treated the black community as bad as anyone in the country. You call them super predators, and you've called them worse than that. No, it was Hillary Clinton who called them super predators. If you want to knock Biden for the crime bill, please do. Lots of people, there's a long line of people who want to knock Biden for the crime bill, but do it accurately. He didn't call anyone super predators or anything worse.
And it is, I do really like these attacks on the crime bill because, having lived through the Clinton years, I mean, what Clinton was this famous triangulator, right? So what he was basically doing was to bring the Democrats back in power. He'd go to Washington from outside Washington, basically concede to the Republicans a lot of these issues that Democrats really didn't ascribe to, and things that he was forced into do that he didn't want to. I mean, right down to things like the budget and all sorts of other things like that. So, and it's one of the reasons why some people think Clinton, some people think he was a pretty good president. Others think he was very weak-spined. And now we're seeing in a lot of ways, we're seeing the fruits of a lot of things Clinton did. And to go back to the crime thing, nobody actually knows why crime has dropped in America over that time. I mean, some people say, hey, the crime bill had a lot of problems, but sure took a lot of criminals off the street and put them away for a long time.
I think it doesn't quite match up. I think the crime rate had topped out just before
then. Yeah, no, that's a really good point. Yeah. And do you know what one of the more interesting theories are?
Lead.
Is lead. Yeah. Right. No, lead is really interesting. Yeah. They cut off lead, and about 17 years later,
we're talking about in petrol here.
Yeah. That you have a bunch of kids who didn't grow up having lead in their house, and so it didn't instant their growth.
Didn't give them brain damage.
There's a theory about abortions, that people started having abortions, so you started having fewer unwanted kids committing crimes. Yeah. But there's still a lot of debate about why exactly that happened. But to some extent, I think you can make the argument. I mean, it was the human cost of all the people who are unjustifiably put away too long wasn't worth it. But you can make the argument that at least some criminals were taken off the street.
Sure.
And but in a state like in the city of New York, you have thousands and thousands and thousands of people alive today who wouldn't be otherwise. I mean, tens of thousands.
Now, I just criticized a whole bunch of Trump attacks, and I've saved my Biden one for last, which is what I think was the worst answer of the debate from anyone, which was Biden on the court packing thing. I'm a bit of a broken record with this, but I just do not think
it's horrendous.
He can keep on doing this for the entire campaign. I just don't think he can.
It is one of the most campaign malpractice things I've ever seen in my life. How do they just not have an answer?
Yeah, like that. And for those who don't know, I'm not going to play it now because it goes forever. But essentially, it's Biden saying, and he's said this many times now. I've seen 4 interviews now where he's done this, where he goes, "I'm not going to answer that question because that's going to become the issue. As soon as I answer the question, that's going to become the issue. We should focus on Trump and the Supreme Court and how it's going to end abortion and the Affordable Health Care Act." That's what he says every single time. Of course, it's going to become the issue. You're a presidential candidate. When you take a position, that becomes news. That's how it works, and then people vote for you.
But I also think that Trump really showed a lot of people how to do certain things. So like him and his taxes during the campaign, he just said, "No, I'm not going to."
Yeah.
And there is a way, where
right.
I kind of think Biden's trying to do that, but it just doesn't work. Yeah. Now, on the other hand, I think this is one of those things in America, like, all this stuff about the Green New Deal, all these issues, like there has been less talk about issues and less mental energy expended on issues in this campaign than on any campaign in the history of the United States. Nobody wants to talk. Nobody even, I don't care what like Biden could be against all sorts of things. There's a lot of people who are going to support him instead of Trump.
I don't even know Trump's issues. I have no idea what Trump's issues are.
He literally doesn't have one. They don't have a platform. They don't have anything. Yeah. And it's incredibly embarrassing.
That's a great parallel to Trump and his taxes. I hadn't thought of that. And I immediately have a suggestion of what the difference is. When you're saying that it doesn't quite work, I'm not quite sure why. I think I know the difference. And the difference is, this actually links in, hang on, I'll get this clip coming up, because this links into a clip I've got lying around. The difference is that with Trump and his taxes, he could just say, I'm not going to show you my taxes, or whatever bullshit excuse. And that's him. But then everyone else around him doesn't need to carry his water. They can go, well, I wish he would show his taxes, or whatever. The Republicans they can all individually come up with whatever response they want. But in Biden's case, if anyone gives a yes or no answer to court packing, that places more pressure on him. So they can't. So what you've got this situation now where every Democrat has now learnt that they're supposed to give that answer that he gives. And they're all giving that answer. And it just becomes dumb. Like, I'll give you an example here. This is Kamala Harris giving exactly the same answer. Here we are. Look at this.
Neither you nor Joe Biden are willing to give a straight answer as to whether or not you're willing to entertain that idea, but it's not some fringe idea. Democrats in Washington are talking about it. Chuck Schumer, the Democratic leader in the Senate, has said that he's not taking anything off the table. Is that an idea that you're willing to think about?
We are 35 days away from an election that is probably the most important election of our lifetime and our children's lifetime. And there is nothing about these next 35 days that Joe or I will take for granted. And so the focus right now is on reminding people that we have this election that is very much in play. It is about reminding people that people are voting right now. Almost 1 million people, Jake, in our country have already voted. We are in the midst of an election, and the Republican leader of the Senate, together with Donald Trump, are in the spirit of hypocrisy trying to push through a nominee while the American people are voting. And so Joe has been really clear. Let's focus on what's happening right now. Deal with later.
It goes on and on and on. There's another minute of that.
I think she's doing a great job.
Oh, look,
I think she's doing exactly what she should do.
She's doing her best.
Yeah.
I don't blame her.
Because you got to think that Kamala Harris's instinct is to go rogue a little bit.
Totally. I don't blame her at all. She's doing her job. But Biden's putting her in that position. Sorry, just let me just give you 2 more quotes and then they'll let you go. Richard Blumenthal, who is also likes to attack. What we need to do before we talk about what happens in the next session of Congress is for Democrats to win the presidency and a majority in the Senate. That's his response to court packing. Bob Casey, I think we've got to wait to get through the election. The key thing right now is people have to understand what's at stake, especially on ACA and pre-existing conditions. They're all marching in line. They all look ridiculous. And my point of view on this is that the longer this goes, the more the press is going to get a taste for blood on this. They're going to keep on asking everyone. The pressure is going to build. Eventually, Biden is going to have to back down. And when he does back down, he's going to have to go, he's going to tamp this down. He's going to have to say, no, I categorically rule out packing the court, which he doesn't want to do. But if he'd gone wishy-washy early on and just said, well, who knows what happens? I'm not going to rule out any hypotheticals, but I'd prefer us not to do that. He would have gotten away with it then. It would have been the end of the topic. But now they're building too much brinksmanship into it, and he's going to have to back down in a big way, and it'll become a much bigger news story than it would have been. Sorry, go for it.
Okay, I basically agree with you, and I thought that it isn't a good answer. Okay, but I think what was going on is that, again, everything the campaign is doing is the most mediated words, like in the world right now. Everything that campaign is doing, there's a lot of smart people with a lot of money doing it, and I think it's about the Senate. And it's about planning how to get through and wave through it. When I talk to my students, sometime I talk about, about the dog bites man story or a man bites dog story, that a man bites dog story is unusual. And so that's a great story, whereas dog bites man. So, but let me tell you something. Democratic, whatever, quote unquote, brain trust, all staying on message and walking in lockstep, that is a man bites dog story. And so I bet there's a lot of people. I wouldn't be surprised if there's some campaign people saying, goddamn right, everyone's on goddamn message. That's what we're doing. And so it's kind of funny when you were reading that, I was thinking, okay, well, there's probably that's a lot more organization than you generally see from the Democratic Party. So I bet that they've pulled it out and just think. So I'm going to go on record saying I think I disagree with you. I don't think he's ever going to back down. They're just going to go through it. And I'll tell you, with this COVID thing now, they've got at least another week or two where nobody cares.
That's true. That is true. That is going to help them. But
specifically, I think it has to do with the Senate. And they don't want to disturb the messaging in North Carolina, in Maine, and possibly now in Montana and in Iowa. Because those other, don't you think those other races look pretty? So, I mean, Maine and North Carolina look very serious right now.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And I think a lot of attention is going to turn. There was an insane poll in Iowa, how far ahead Biden was up in Iowa. And I'm not sure what's going on in Montana right now, but I think that's going to be the next focus. And they probably said, hey, we want to fuck up Joni Ernst, and we're not going to talk about court packing.
Yeah, well, no, you're right. I mean, North Carolina and Iowa is essentially, those two are not just the Senate, but if they get North Carolina and Iowa, you're talking 51 votes, which allows them to ignore Joe Manchin, which would be so important.
And can I add actually one last thing? The other thing I don't understand, this is what I was going to get at, though, is that I don't understand is I don't understand why they don't rule it out. It's never going to happen.
Yeah, I know.
It's just one of the silliest things. And I don't know if there's some sort of breakwater inside the party that they've shut down Bernie and AOC and a lot of people. And because everyone are being so good. I mean, again, everyone is just, let's get through these last days together. And maybe that's a tripwire somewhere. That there's some people there who say, look, we're going to go rogue if you say that.
Depending on time, we might talk about this a bit more later on. But I wanted to see what your thoughts were about what I think most people will agree was Trump's worst moment, which was the urging, when asked if he would urge his supporters to stay calm after a contested election, he responded with I'm urging my supporters to go into the polls and watch very carefully because that's what has to happen. I'm urging them to do it. And then he went on to bitch about Philadelphia poll watchers who weren't even registered, so of course they weren't allowed in. And he didn't even, like, at least in the white supremacy answer, he made a perfunctory effort to condemn, like he said, oh yeah, sure, I condemn them. Yeah. Proud Boys, stand down, stand by, whatever, and then he moved on. He didn't even make a perfunctory effort there. He didn't even say, yeah, stay calm. Now, let's talk about poll watchers. He didn't even do that. He just went straight to, let's talk about, I'm going to ignore you. I don't give a stuff about whether my supporters are calm. Let's talk about poll watching. And I think most people agree that is worse. Now McMaster came out with some statement today as well, which I'm not.
Oh, about Russia?
Yeah, I'm not familiar with this, but John brought it up on the show.
Oh, well, there's all this crazy. I mean, the other thing that when you have this overload of information. It's like tape saturation, right? Rock music. That there's all these other stories going on that we totally miss, right?
Yes.
That remember the Senate report on Russian interference in the last election, the 2016 election, which nobody talks about, and that's probably the most important bit of news all year. This is just something that you can't even get your mind around, that you have this former national security advisor publicly, his own national security advisor, publicly saying he's aiding and abetting Russian disinformation in the United States. The president of the United States is doing that, which I mean, I can't think in the history of the United States had there ever been a disaffection on that level from a president saying something so extraordinary, and the implications of which you can't even get your mind around. And like literally nobody's going to be talking about it again for the next 40 to 33 days. Yeah,
I guess it's a little like when the Access Hollywood tape broke in 2016 on the same day as Obama tried to put out a warning about Russian disinformation, and everyone just completely ignored it.
Yeah.
Because all this conflicting news.
The saturation of news that Donald Trump has accomplished, that's another good example of it, how it sucks up everything, and you so rarely see that.
On that note, this is something I said on the show, but I want to say it on the podcast as well for those who don't watch the show, because I care enough about this and no one is talking about this. There are just 2 points I want to make about mail-in ballots with Trump going on about this, okay? And I think it's important that everyone realize these. First of all, he makes a big show about unsolicited mail ballots versus solicited mail ballots, right? Where he says, in Florida, you ask for a mail-in ballot and then you fill it out. In other places, like say California, they just send everyone ballots. There's ballots all over the place and garbage bins overflowing, and then you have fraud. Right? That's what he says. Okay. Now, you need to realize that none of the examples he gives of places where there's voter fraud, where they go, discard ballots, none of them are states with unsolicited mail ballots. They're all states that are like Florida. They're like Pennsylvania or New York or states like that. Let me tell you the states in total that have unsolicited mail ballots. They are Colorado, Oregon, Utah, Washington, and Hawaii are the 5 states that have had mail-in ballots for like a decade. And they send them out, not to everyone, to registered voters. And there are 5 other states in America that this year send out unsolicited mail ballots to registered voters. They are California, Nevada, New Jersey, Vermont, and Washington, D.C. And what they have in common is that none of them matter for the presidential election. So come election day, when Trump's saying, this is all rigged because of the mail ballots all over the place. No, none of the states that we'll be talking about have mail ballots going all over the place. They are all under the system that he professes everyone should have. Yeah. So that is bullshit, okay? It's important that people understand that. The second thing that's bullshit is that he says that he's worried about the mail-in vote count taking forever. Why can't we do it on the day? Why can't we do it on the day? They just take days, weeks and months to commit fraud. Okay. Do you know why it takes weeks and months to sometimes process lots of mail-in ballots? I'll tell you why. Because they need to process them for security reasons, to make sure that people don't vote twice, what Trump is encouraging people to do in North Carolina, that people don't vote twice, that people, it actually checks out. They have a lot of these, in fact, I think almost all of them have barcodes they need to check and all the rest of it. It takes a while to actually process them for security processes, okay?
And you match the signature.
Yeah, and you need, and that's part of it. You need to match the signature as well. Now, most states, not most states, a lot of states do that now. When you send out the mail-in ballot, they do it immediately. They match the signature, and then they pull out the envelope that's inside that envelope, and they put it with all the other ballots, and they count them together, okay? That's how Florida works, which is why Florida gets to count all its mail-in ballots on the night. But there are a bunch of states where legally in those states, they are not allowed to process mail-in ballots until Election Day. And so those states don't check signatures until Election Day or after. So it will take them maybe a week to process them, maybe 2 weeks.
And, go ahead. Well, and a lot of times you have these secretaries of states who say, we should be able to count them and prepare them before Election Day to be ready, and the legislatures won't do it.
This is where I'm going.
Okay.
And I was going to say, also, this time you're going to have poll watchers scrutinizing every single one of them, going, hey, how about that one? How about that one? Which is going to slow down the process even more. Now, 3 of those states that I've just described that don't start until Election Day are Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan, the 3 critical states in this election, okay? So all of them you can expect to take weeks. For the last month, in fact, more. For the last several months, the Democratic Party in those states have been trying to pass bills through the state legislature to move those processing dates back, and they have been blocked by the Republicans who hold the state legislature in those 3 states. So what you have a situation where, and I'm sorry when I say this, it sounds so partisan, but it is just the truth. You have a situation where you have, at the state level, Republicans stopping them from fixing a problem, so they will guarantee there will be a delay that then at the federal level, Donald Trump will complain about and use as an excuse for why the election is rigged. And when they try and fix it, they are blocked. And that, to me, is incredibly cynical and should be called out on as many forums as possible, which is why I did it on the Friday show, and I'm doing it here. So,
yeah, I totally agree. Yeah. I mean, one thing I always say is that the Republicans, and again, the Democrat, I have no charter for the Democrats at all, but because they have their own problems. But one thing Republicans are very good at is setting the house on fire and then standing outside and throwing rocks at the firefighters. I mean, it just happens over and over and over again. It's a strategy, and particularly the voting thing. That's a systematic thing. They have conferences about it. There's tapes of people saying, look, we're doing this to lower the vote and stuff like that. Now, can I say one thing about the mail-in voting generally? I really honestly think it's overstated. As we've said on the show before, there's not going to be a problem with the United States Post Office. That's not an issue. You do have an issue. You have a lot more inaccurately filled out ballots when it comes into mail. There's all these different estimates, but 6% or 4% versus 1% normally. I think that's okay. I don't think that's a problem. It's the party's duty to get their people to learn how to fill out their fucking ballots. That's not an issue of voter suppression, stuff like that. Now, it's often very hard, and I know from getting this myself, you open these big things and there's pages of fine print. You don't really get it, but you have to sign the envelope. Sometimes you have to put it in an internal envelope and then put it in the envelope and then sign it in the ballot, and it's not really clear. All that said, that's the party's job, to get their people out and to tell them how to fill out their ballots and put it in the goddamn mail. Yeah. And so that, I don't think, is voter suppression, and I still think we're going to see a very, very high turnout for this election, which is good.
I should say that, I agree with all of that, but I should say that mail-in voting, it does have its issues when implemented incorrectly. Like, for instance, there's a story in Brooklyn this week, a contractor who's hired to print out absentee ballots to all registered voters in Brooklyn and Queens, or most of them. He unfortunately sent them out with the incorrect return address on the envelopes. And 100,000 of those ballots went out, and they don't know who they went out to. So that's a bit of a problem.
Yeah, that's kind of a lot. One thing people should remember, though, is that, 100,000 times 10 is 1 million. So that's 1/10 of 1%. That's a lot, actually.
Yeah.
But one thing I want to remind people, there's 100 million ballots, right, going to be cast or more. And there's going to be problems. It's a really big country. It's a very, very large country, and there's always going to be problems.
But it's just a shame when 100,000 people's vote is compromised. Also, on top of that, this is a smaller number, but still, there's apparently in Virginia, 1,400 voters received 2 absentee ballots mailed to them. And there's safeguards in place apparently to make sure they can't vote twice. But if they tried to vote twice, there was a verification system that would find it out. But still, you do get problems. Biden's Texas political director Dallas Jones is currently locked in a lawsuit for illegal ballot harvesting. Ballot harvesting is something that you're not allowed to do in almost all states, apart from California and Nevada, where you go around from usually old people's homes, going around from door to door going, hey, I'll help you out. Let me help you out. Yeah. And then they collect a whole bunch of ballots, and they might fill them out themselves, or they might basically pressure the people to vote a certain way, and then they hand them all in for the old ladies.
Yeah.
You're not supposed to do that at all in 47 states or 48 states. even in California, there's restrictions. You're not supposed to do that. Well, I just described. But in most states, you're not even allowed to hand in more than 1 or 2 ballots, and they've got to be for you or your family members, essentially. Yeah. But yeah. So you do get a bit of that kind of stuff. Did you see the Project Veritas thing this week with Ilhan Omar?
Oh no, what was it?
Okay, the Project Veritas, who are we talked about them last week. They're not the best. They're kind of miss, hit, and miss, and hit.
Great pratfalls.
Yeah. Like that, they get a hit 1 hour every 10 or so, basically. But they basically undercover conservative operatives try to catch people out. Right? And anyway, they had a video out this week of Ilhan Omar supporters. Maybe a hit. We'll see. They've got video of people actually paying for ballots, allegedly, with the guy's face. Like so, and the Minnesota police onto it. So we'll find out. We'll find out if there's anything to it. If there is, good on them.
Can I just mention one thing? Because you do hear about this a lot.
Yeah.
That messing with the mail and messing with ballots are fed. I mean, a state ballot, I think that would be a state crime, but particularly when it comes again to the post office. I mean, that's a federal crime, messing with mail, paying people to do ballots. Everyone knows that's illegal.
Yeah.
Okay. So if they're doing it, there's no organization in the world that might be an AOC supporter, but nobody remotely associated with AOC said, oh, let's go pay people to do ballots, because it's much easier to go out and get people to vote. Like, why would you? It just kind of doesn't make sense. That said, it would be bad if that happened. And if they did do it, they should be prosecuted.
Well, that's exactly my question. My question is, look, I see them on video. I mean, if it's true, it's true. But my question is, why is this happening from a logical point of view? Ilhan Omar, she won her 2018 contest 78% to 21%. Yeah. Why would she pay anyone? Like, they're talking about $800, $200, between $200 and $800 per vote. Why would she pay anyone when she wins by 57%? What's the point? Why would she take a risk? Or someone from her campaign, why would they take a risk? And also, she won the primary by 30,000 votes as well. So let's do the maths. Let's say she bought 20,000 votes from her primary, which isn't enough to win, but let's just say she did, just to spring a bit of sugar on the result. That's $4 million to $16 million in votes, depending if it's $200 or $800. She raised $4 million in total. So it doesn't make sense. That's all I'm saying. I can see the video. I'm looking forward to the police investigation. I will bring it to you if there's anything to it. As you can see, I'm bringing it up, but something smells funny to me. Yeah, that's all I'm saying.
Hey, I had 2 Fox News related things.
Yeah,
Can we
go
talk
for
about
it.
them really briefly?
Yeah.
So I've been trying to keep an eye on Fox, and I haven't seen this myself, but enough people have been posting photos of it on Twitter and stuff. I believe it. So apparently one of the things that Fox News in America is doing is when they do stories about Trump and the coronavirus, they're doing, the background roll that they always show. And they have a lot of photos of Trump wearing a mask. Have you heard about that?
I have heard this. Yes.
A lot of people have been noticing that, which I think is such a Fox thing to do.
Yes.
I just love stuff like that, because that someone said, and you just don't know if they laugh when they do it or if they got the call from headquarters in Roger Ailes' grave, where or there's just this ghostly thing that comes above saying, for the B-roll, get pictures of Trump in the mask, you know, and then they just do it, and it's really hilarious. And particularly because Fox viewers know that Trump doesn't wear a mask because they joke about, you're not supposed to wear a mask. So I don't know if it's all kind of a joke and the viewers see it and they know that Fox is doing it and it's funny to them, or if Fox is doing it because they think the viewers are stupid, which frankly a lot of them are. But I just think that's a nice little thing. And the other thing, my favorite story is the Kimberly Guilfoyle story. Are you familiar with
sexual
that?
harassment.
Yeah. And the New Yorker
through.
broke this story, which again is just one of the greatest stories of all time. That that there was intimations of this when she joined the Trump campaign, because she was a member of the Five, right? Kimberly Guilfoyle. She's one of the really loud, brassy people on that. And now, of course, she's running around with Don Jr. And I guess she tested positive for coronavirus during the Mount Rushmore trip, right? And I thought that Don Jr. did too, but maybe not. But anyway, the New Yorker broke this story, and I don't know if you know this, it was by Jane Mayer, who is a mofo reporter. I mean, she did the big books on the Koch brothers and stuff like this, and she's a master of this. And it is some fun kind of reading. I don't know if you saw it.
Should we put in the homework? Should we put in the homework?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, we'll put in the homework.
Can I read my favorite part?
Please do.
Okay. So what it was is that one of her female employers were being her employees were being sexually harassed by her and another male producer at Fox, filed a thing, and apparently they settled for $4 million. Okay. But Guilfoyle had to leave. Okay. So it's like, I just love stuff like this. According to a dozen well-informed sources familiar with her complaints. Okay. And this is the New Yorker and it's Jane Mayer. Yeah. Okay. So a dozen, I'm assuming, means a dozen. Yeah. Okay. The assistant alleged that Guilfoyle, her direct supervisor, subjected her frequently to degrading, abusive, and sexually inappropriate behavior. Among other things, she was required to work at Guilfoyle's apartment while the Fox host displayed herself naked and was shown photographs of the genitalia of men with whom Guilfoyle had had sexual relations. Guilfoyle spoke incessantly and luridly about her sex life. On one occasion, demanded a massage of her bare thighs. Other times, she said Guilfoyle told her to submit to a Fox employee's demands for sexual favors, encouraged her to sleep with wealthy and powerful men, asked her to critique her naked body, demanded that she share a room with her on business trips, required her to sleep over at her apartment, and exposed herself to her.
I don't know. This is probably an incredibly inappropriate thing to say. I mean, it almost certainly is, but that's what I do. I don't quite get, like, what is going on at Fox? You hear all these stories with Bill O'Reilly, this one here. Like, there's so many stories. Or what was that guy's name? Ed Henry?
Oh,
like,
yeah, he was another one, right?
Yeah. So many of these stories. And there is no network with a larger array of extremely ugly old men who just rotate their way through. And it's a horrible image. Not that I'm saying it wouldn't be, I'm not saying it'd be a great image if everyone was good looking, but every time I hear one of these stories, I'm just imagining, Lou Dobbs.
And Roger Ailes himself is and again, I don't feel comfortable talking about people's looks, but I mean, it's a power thing that when you're a boss and you're in these things, and of course, to some extent it's extended to other places. You have terrible things alleged about Les Moonves, for example, of course, Harvey Weinstein, Charlie Rose. I mean, there's all these people who have this thing of inviting female employees over to their house and say, "Oh, I'm going to walk around in my underwear." It's really, really bad. But obviously, Guilfoyle, who is a really an unpleasant, person who, like a lot of the Trump people, have really bought into it and have been saying really unspeakable, despicable things along the way. It's kind of fun to read, I have to say. And it apparently seems to be true. I mean, I do respect that a dozen people have said this. Sure. And it is part of a pattern at Fox.
It certainly is. And I'm going to hell for that comment I just made.
That's okay.
I've really organized this show terribly. Like I said, not very well prepared, and there's so many things I haven't come in close to covering here. I haven't mentioned the Supreme Court yet.
No, it's true.
COVID. I just talk about Trump and into anything else.
Can we talk about Amy Coney Barrett real quickly?
Okay,
about that AP story, because that should be in homework.
Let's do that. I am going.
Out of time?
Oh no, I'm worried about in particular Paul Hand guy who's going to flag soon. It's let's just talk about Amy Coney Barrett for a second, and I'll do something else entirely. I'll talk more about the Supreme Court next time, because this is going to just keep on going for the next few weeks at least. So, but you tell me about Amy Coney Barrett.
I think it's interesting just because amidst everything else, the Senate is going to move forward with trying to confirm this justice, and it looks like there could be a vote just before the election. So the only question that might come up, and Lord knows anything else can happen, this thing is there any way that would stop the Senate from confirming her? Yeah. Okay, so I don't know. This is the AP. AP doesn't do big investigative stories like this very much. It's like the ABC. It's a very neutral place. If they do invest the manpower and woman power in it, it's probably a serious thing. They say they spent months. They spent going back through all of the group publications, and it has a lot of weight behind it. And basically, it's this group called People of Praise. That's some sort of Catholic-related sect that this. It's
it's a cross-denominational kind of religious group that she belongs to, essentially. Because it's not just Catholics; it's also Protestants, and it's like.
Forgive me. Okay, okay, right.
It's kind of a
Christian fellowship.
Yeah, it's kind of a charismatic kind of fellowship. Yeah, go on.
Yeah. So anyway, and so they have these enclaves, I guess, where people live together. So the AP says things like this: the group has been portrayed by some former members and in books, blogs, and news reports as hierarchical, authoritarian, and controlling, where men dominate their wives, leaders dictate members' life choices, and those who leave are shunned. And there's a lot of stuff in here where, of course, all the hierarchy is exclusively older men. A lot of the people living there are these women. They take over their financial life. They're being told to do what the men say. And I find it very, very disturbing. I mean, what could possibly go wrong? Okay, we've seen this in so many cults, and of course, the line between religion and cults is very odd. It's not clear where you cross that line into being a cult. But it's just the portrait that's painted in the story is a little bit disturbing. The focus on it is a little bit Handmaid's Tale-y. And in fact, they used to call the people in the group handmaids until they didn't like the association with the book. And it does raise some questions. So I have these friends who are smart, and they say, oh, yeah, it's so subjugating women that now one of the people in the group is now being nominated for the Supreme Court. How bad could it be? Yeah. Which I guess is a fair point. But you still have to wonder why there's these people who feel they have to set up this community where the women are kept in this subjugated thing. They're not allowed to do things. It's very, very obviously patriarchal at best, and at worst, it's incredibly disturbing. And it really isn't being anti-religious or anything to say, what are the chances there's sexual harassment, sexual abuse, and that sort of stuff where you're in that? And if you're not doing that, why would you even do that? And that this is something that's producing someone who, ironically, are on the cusp of taking away a woman's right to choose, right?
Yeah, I suppose what I'd say is if it indeed is a cult, then that's got nothing to do with religion. That's a cult. Like whether it's centered around a religion or not, a cult is a cult. Yeah. Right. I haven't read the AP story, so I can't.
It's fun reading.
Okay, so I can't comment on that. The impression I got until now, and I will check out what the AP has to say, was that it wasn't so much like a commune, like in the Leftovers, those guys who walked around in white gowns. I don't think it's like that. I think it is a fellowship. Like they don't live together. Like they live in the same.
They're gender separated a lot of the time.
No, yeah, but I was saying like they don't live all in the same commune. They live in houses, and they're in fact a lot of them are in Pete Buttigieg's town. That's where
in South Bend.
South Bend, yeah, that's where Amy lives in South Bend. Yeah. Anyway,
that's where Notre Dame is.
There you go. I was going to say that the impression I get is that there's certainly a support network for each other, and so they have some kind of relationship. I'm just not 100% sure. But for me, it's not just about. My question is not just about she's a Supreme Court justice, but also her husband seems to have given up his career for her. Like her husband is looking after the kids more than she is, and her husband's cooking and all the rest of it. So I feel like even if that particular group is pretty hardcore, at least Amy Coney Barrett seems to be living her best life at the very least.
It's great for her. Yeah. So can I read one other really quick thing? Here's another example of the thing. One of the ex-members says her handmaid, to whom she was supposed to confide her innermost thoughts and emotions, then repeated what she said to the male heads who would consult her husband on the proper correction. There'd be open meetings where he'd just stand for the group and they'd tell you what was wrong with you, she said. And I would ask questions. I was a critical thinker. When she told her husband she wanted to wait to have more children, he accompanied her to a gynecological appointment to ensure she couldn't get birth control. I was treated like a brood mare.
That's not very nice.
So, but anyway, and I bring this up, A, because it is just, it shows you what goes on in some of these religious sects, and then B, it might be something that might cause more questions about her. Now, the right has tried to inoculate her by any question like this, you're being anti-Catholic, anti-being Catholic. Nobody cares what religion anyone has, what question. It bothers me, and I think it bothers a lot of people when you have so many people on the right, like Mike Pence saying, I'm a Christian first, a conservative second, a Republican third, and it's like, wait, aren't you an American in there somewhere? And they seem to put these hierarchies ahead of being American, which I think it's fair to call them out on. And, if she is someone who puts her religious beliefs above that of the Constitution, that's a disturbing issue, and she should be called out or questioned about it.
If she does, absolutely, yeah.
If she does.
Yeah, I'm going to talk more at length about the Supreme Court thing next week, just because of time. I'm just so conscious of it.
Okay.
Let me ask you about just you were talking in the media. I wanted to ask you last time about these are ancient stories now, but Tucker Carlson on Fox played a whole bunch of tapes about a month ago. Do you remember this?
Jeff Zucker.
Yeah, these CNN tapes.
Unbelievable.
And one of them was about Jeff Zucker, who seemed to be. It was Jeff Zucker talking to Michael Cohen. It was just.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. And he seemed to be basically trying to plan with him how to best help out Donald Trump. Back in 2016, this was.
Yeah.
And also had Chris Cuomo planning out interviews with Michael Cohen, where he's going, okay, Michael Cohen's about to go on CNN, and he's going, okay, what you should do is you should do this, and when they ask you this, you should answer questions like this. And what's going on with Michael Cohen and CNN? You're in the media? Do you have any idea what Jeff Zucker's story is? Like what?
Yeah. Well, no, he's the guy. He was an NBC person. He did The Apprentice.
Yeah.
So he's very close to Trump, right? And in those tapes, he would say he called him the boss. Hey, you need to get the boss over here and stuff like this. Yeah. So CNN lost its soul a long time ago. Yeah. There's a lot of talented people there. Obviously, I think Tapper does a great job. Yeah, Wolf is kind of a robot, and Anderson Cooper, I still can't forget of him when he was the host of The Mole.
Isn't it funny? I mean, that's a good image we should remember, but isn't it funny that the guy who's a robot is called Wolf? You could not get a less robot-y name than Wolf.
Wolf Blitzer is just, I don't know if it's a porn name or what. We forget it now, right? But it's just Wolf.
Yeah, anyway,
but it's really a disturbing place. And maybe I said this last time, but the thing, I think in so many ways, it makes people dumber just because they have these 9 people and there's this host, but then there's another host above him or her and then another. And so Wolf will throw it to Jake, and then Jake will throw it to Anderson, and then Anderson will be on the panel, and then he'll ask something of, say, Axelrod, and then Axelrod can say anything. Monkeys are flying out of my butt, and he'll just go, okay, let's go to Donna Brazil. And there's never any discussion or anything like this. Yeah. And you have to understand, I mean, you're in broadcasting, or I don't think they even do it here that much, but everyone's being talked to in their ears, right? And so when Cooper is asking someone a question, someone's yelling in his ear, okay, throw it back to Jake. Jake, you throw it back to Campbell. Campbell, you throw it to whoever. And so there's all this chaos in their minds, and that comes off to people. So, and plus, you have these, they're fighting for ratings. They've got MSNBC on one side and Fox obviously eating their lunch on the other. And they bring in someone like Zucker, who's a buffoon from entertainment television, right? And so, of course, he's brought in, hey, we're going to jazz it up. We're going to make it more entertaining. We're going to raise the ratings. And then the next thing you know, these guys are talking with these thugs like Michael Cohen. And, and that's the way I think people, oh, yeah, come on. We just need you to do this, because they're not really thinking about the news. They've completely lost the gene of that there should be an oppositional or there should be these arm's length things. And so, everyone's forgotten about it, but the minor scandal with Donna Brazil.
Yeah.
She was one of their commentators. She was apparently feeding questions to Hillary Clinton, which is just terrible. Now she's on Fox, right? Because Fox is so smart. They have this wounded sort of bird from CNN who could be a milquetoasty right liberal voice there. And Donna Brazil knows that if she does anything wrong, someone might bring up her little thing. So I think it just completely comes up I don't want to say corruption, but this hollowing out of all the journalistic morality inside that organization. And again, that's not saying that Dana Bash isn't brilliant. I think Tapper has been great. Brian Stetler stepping up, right? I don't know if you see him much, but he's the press guy on CNN. I think does a
know
great
his work.
job.
Yeah. I wasn't thrilled when he was on The View and they asked him about the things we were just talking about, and he said, I'm not a spokesperson for CNN, and I don't comment on these kinds of things. I just think it's sad that people are playing private phone calls. And I just thought, hang on. You do that all the time. What are you talking about, mate?
Yeah,
and all you do is comment on Fox. Why isn't it your job just to comment on CNN? Anyway.
Thank you. That is a great call out. Yeah, that's such a great call. All these networks, they just, like, I don't know if you remember a long time ago, remember how Jim Cramer went on the Daily Show and Jon Stewart just took him apart.
I do.
And Jim Cramer, right? He does one of these stock shows. Yeah. So, and he's on CNBC. And so all the NBC networks that are MSNBC and NBC, they just shut down commentary on it. And back then, every time Jon Stewart sneezed, everyone said, "Oh my God, can you believe what Jon Stewart did?" And that whole network and NBC just completely shut that down. So there's all these hidden hands in these networks.
Here we go. I've got the video. Here. Okay. Enjoy.
There are some ethical questions that are being thrown around about CNN lately. There's a 2016 audio of your president, Jeff Zucker, offering debate advice to President Trump that was released. Jake Tapper was recently caught trying to allegedly influence a congressional election. And I had serious problems with the way Chris Cuomo had a reoccurring primetime sort of comic routine with his brother instead of asking about policies that were literally sending my friend Janice Dean's older relatives to die in nursing homes. So with the criticism of CNN, do you believe that this is acceptable? And don't you think there's enough fair criticism to go all the way around right now in just how news networks are run?
Well, first, I think you should write a book. I think you've listed off all of these storylines. A lot of them, though, are cherry-picked, coming from these audio tapes that Tucker Carlson's been airing. And I do have a question about this that relates to my book. Michael Cohen says these audio tapes were only held by Trump, the Trump Organization, and the DOJ. So all of a sudden, they're airing on Fox News. You have to wonder if it's another example of this feedback loop that exists between Trump and Fox. But look, I'm not a spokesperson for Fox, for CNN or Fox. I'm not a spokesperson for CNN. It's not for me to comment on these tapes. Here's what I do think is sad, though. I think it's sad that private conversations get leaked out, get distorted, and then, they become polarized and weaponized. That's the environment we're in, and that's sad. If our text messages or if my phone calls with friends were suddenly taken out of context and distorted, I feel like that's just... Let me put it this way. I think the Trump age has ruined a lot of friendships. I think that's really sad. And I hope we can start to rebuild. I hope we can start to rebuild those friendships rather than, all feel like we're at war with each other.
Ooh, he's slick. He's slick.
I got this. Sorry there. Yeah,
and was that Meghan McCain doing that to him?
It was. It was Brian Stelter. He's worried about the quality of Michael Cohen's friendships.
No, it's really, I know. It's really terrible because he really should have, he is the media guy there and he should have stepped back. And I think that I think what the proper answer would be to say, a good news organization has a way to handle those and should handle ethical violations publicly. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's what he should say. And he would hope that CNN would investigate those things and publicly say what had happened. But we should also say that MSNBC has its own problems as well.
Yes,
it's become very sad. But on the other hand, do you guys see Nicole Wallace much here, Deadline White House?
It's not on Australian TV, but Megan being pathetic, I do watch her sometimes.
Yeah, she's really, it's kind of funny. She was a spokesperson for the Bush White House, and now she's this unbelievable star of MSNBC. She's a very smart person. Now they've expanded her show to 2 hours, which is amazing. And it is really funny. It's really been the home of all the Never-Trumpers like Steve Schmidt and Rick Wilson and things like that. But I just don't understand those people. And who was the guy? Was it Stuart Stevens who just wrote the book about Republicanism and stuff like this? Yeah. And there is that question, like, why were you guys Republicans? Like, so Nicole Wallace worked in the Bush White House, and she helped put two people in the Supreme Court who presumably would overthrow Roe versus Wade if they had a chance. And now she's on MSNBC being basically a Democratic cheerleader. Yeah. It's like, what? I can't quite figure out what's inside their souls.
That's a very good question. And if I had a soul myself, I might comment on that. But
not that we would know.
I don't want to appear hypocritical. But I do agree with you that it would be good to have these networks call themselves out a bit more. Like, let's say one of them had people who went around just squatting in places they're not supposed to be to record podcasts. I would like those people to be called out in the worst possible way, but that will never happen. Look, I'm very, very conscious of time. So what I'm going to do is I can see 2 points that I want to make that I think are going to be relevant over next week. So I'm going to restrict myself to those 2 points. While I'm making those points, you think about anything you want to say, and I'll just come to you and go, give it to me. And, so the first thing is, there's a lot of talk about healthcare at the moment because of the Supreme Court, Obamacare, and also it's going to be brought up because of Trump and his current condition. They're going to talk about Obamacare. They're going to talk about pre-existing conditions of people who have COVID, and the fact that he's in court currently trying to destroy Obamacare, which would help people who are in the position that he currently is in. I can see it coming now. So let me just explain briefly what the problem is with Donald Trump's healthcare position, because people don't talk about that. He says, we've got a pre-existing conditions bill. We're going to protect pre-existing conditions. He says that all the time. In fact, all Republicans say that. We are going to preserve pre-existing conditions protections, regardless of what happens in court. Even if Obamacare is smashed, we are going to protect that. Okay, let me tell you why they're not going to protect that. The reason they're not going to protect that is because they are all talking about a bill which they are pretty sure you won't have read. And it's written by Tom Tillis, who is Senator of North Carolina. He's probably about to lose, maybe not. Tight contest, we'll see. His bill says this: insurers must continue selling coverage to patients with pre-existing conditions at comparable prices to what they charge other consumers. Okay? Protections. Except it also allows insurers to limit the benefits provided in such coverage.
Oh.
So they have to charge you the same rate, but they don't have to deliver the same product. They don't have to deliver the product that you need.
Yeah.
They can say, well, you don't get those benefits. We're not offering those benefits on your plan. Okay? It also doesn't maintain the Obamacare's limits on out-of-pocket costs. They can charge you whatever they like for out-of-pocket costs, or a ban on annual and lifetime benefit caps, as in if your healthcare costs more than $100,000 in a particular year, tough luck. You're out of luck. No more health insurance. Okay? So the premiums must be the same, yes, but they can charge you whatever they like on the co-payments. They can have a very low coverage cap, so you're not covered, and they don't even have to cover you for your particular disease. So it's not coverage for pre-existing conditions. And no matter how many times they say it is, that's the bill they're talking about. Okay, so that's something you need to understand, because it doesn't get talked about.
Right.
The second thing you need to understand is the reason why fundamentally Donald Trump's healthcare plans, in so much as they exist, and they don't really exist, are never going to work. Never. The reason why is very simple, and I don't think Trump understands this, to be honest, but it's very, very simple. People don't get health insurance for flu shots. The reason they get health insurance is for when something big happens. They have a car accident, when they get cancer, when they get MS, something big that costs a lot of money. That's why they get health insurance, because health insurance is expensive, okay? Right. So it needs to be for a big thing. But the problem is the big stuff is all of healthcare costs in America. If you look at the top 5% of people using healthcare, chew up like 90% of the costs. I haven't got the number off the top of my head. That's off the top of my head. I don't have the number in front of me, but it's about that. It's big. It's well over 80.
Yeah, next to end of life stuff. Yeah,
exactly. So it's basically you either aren't costing much in healthcare, or you're costing everything in healthcare. And the reason you get health insurance is for that everything moment when that's you. That's why you get health insurance, okay? The problem is, what that means is there's only two ways you can reduce the costs of healthcare for any particular American. One way is the government can subsidize your insurance payments more, or subsidize them entirely if it's Medicare for all. But let's not talk about Medicare for all. Just generally speaking, either the government subsidizes your insurance payment to make it cheaper, or alternatively, you cover less of the big stuff. So then it costs less money. So they're the only two options. There is no other option, because all the coverage is for the big stuff. So either you don't cover some of that big stuff, or someone needs to pay for the insurance premiums that are going to cover that big stuff for you. They are the only two options. And the problem is Trump refuses and Republicans refuse to choose between those two options. They say you can do neither. And it's not true. It is impossible. You need to choose one. The Democrats choose the government paying more. That's the option they choose, right? The Republicans need to either choose the government paying more or providing less coverage. So what they do is they choose option 2 and they lie about it through the bills that I have just talked about, with exceptions everywhere and loopholes everywhere. That is a way of paying less of the big stuff by providing exceptions and loopholes. That is the reason, in a nutshell, that Trump's healthcare plans are never going to work, no matter what he says. And until Republicans get serious, and there are some of them out there, they're just not Congress people. Until some of them get serious, people in power get serious about approaching healthcare seriously, that will always bedevil their plans.
Okay, can I say something really quickly?
Please do.
This is a very, very complicated issue, right?
Yes, yeah.
And I think you're a naive child when it comes to it. Because really what it's about, I think it's about insurance companies.
Yeah.
Okay, so that the impetus of this is not to have a healthcare plan. It's not to make it work. It's not that it can't work. It's not a bug. It's a feature. Okay, because there's many issues with healthcare and prices in America, but one of them is that you have the insurance companies basically skimming 10 to 15% off the top, like right there.
Yeah.
And so they don't want, it's not like Republicans want this. It's like insurance companies don't want, because it's bad for their business, right? If they, if you insure someone about, getting in a motorcycle accident, right? They want to just say, oh, we'll only pay $100,000, and that way they can plan for it and then screw you, right? But of course, the reason that's bad for society, obviously, is that if I'm riding my motorcycle, say without a helmet or whatever, and then I induce $1 million in medical costs, the insurance company gets away with only $100,000. I go bankrupt, okay? And where do I get my medical care? At a government paid for, what they call a public hospital, right? Which, of course, are always basket houses and stuff like that. So I think the issue is mostly they don't have a plan. They don't have a plan in the sense of having a healthcare plan. Their plan is to do with the insurance, what's good for the insurance companies. And what Obamacare was trying to do is box the insurance companies in and basically saying, look, we're all going to have a level playing field, right? You have to have they tried to get around it, but basically, so my wife and I, we basically allegedly knew that the worst that could happen to us is that, if we both got cancer and both got hit by a car, our out of payment for 1 year would only be $30,000, say. And that's designed to stop families from going bankrupt and stuff like that. That's not a controversial thing. It's like, that's what people think insurance is. I pay you money, and if I break my leg, you do it. And even in the context of Obamacare, there's all these ways they got around it, right? So I think that people should understand that what they're doing, and even Obamacare couldn't get rid of the private insurance companies, right? All they tried to do is put them into a little box, right? And then, of course, the individual mandate was just telling people, hey, you have to get insurance. Again, you'd think Republicans would be in favor of personal responsibility in terms of, hey, you have to have insurance. You got to pay for it. But the deal is, if you pay for it, you'll be protected. And again, it's one of those things that really isn't all that controversial, except it's not a debate about serving people. It's a debate about how you handle this enormous insurance company, right, which is taking 15% of this $1 trillion industry.
I'd probably argue that the analogy, that the description I just gave before is something about healthcare worldwide, not just America. Even in places with public healthcare, even in places like with the Medicare for all equivalents, all the rest of it. But having said that, I love that you put me in my place. So that's the important bit. And then my final point. Do you want to say anything else? Before
the only thing I think we should really look forward to now is the vice presidential debate.
Yeah,
because
it's important.
there could be crazy things going on right now. I mean, McConnell and the head of the RNC and Trump and Pence and all these scary people we don't even know are sitting down and gaming this out. And I think this people are saying to Trump, look, you tell us how freaking sick you are, because we're going to have to do some triage at some point. Trump could be going along with that. He could be refusing to talk to them. And the way that Pence behaves at that debate, I think is going to be incredibly interesting. Because is he going to start being really presidential?
He's always a bit presidential, isn't he?
Yeah, but I mean, is he going to be incredibly sycophantic and saying, "Oh, President Trump did this, President Trump did that"?
Yeah.
It's going to be very, very, very interesting.
Vice President Pence did this.
Yeah, and the other thing I'm really waiting for is that I really want to see Kamala Harris go. Tell us about heading up America's coronavirus task force. Mike.
Yeah,
tell us more about. Come, let's sit down. Let's talk about that task force.
Yeah.
You look so good running the coronavirus task force. How is that going, Mike? That's what I'd like to see.
That is definitely coming. That's a great call. And I also am looking forward to seeing Kamala Harris saying, I don't want to answer that question about court packing because we should all focus on the Obamacare and that there's an election going on. I think we're going to hear that one as well. So the final thing I want to talk about is since everyone is going to talk about COVID, there is a current talking point out there which is completely misleading, which I just want to, once again, is not being communicated much. So I want to explain to you why it's misleading. This is the talking point. It's, as always, been advanced by Kayleigh McEnany.
No, look at the global numbers that I'm giving you, which is 4% of the population, 24% of the deaths from COVID. Isn't that how can that be a success?
And I'm giving you the numbers that we believe are very indicative of where we stand vis-a-vis the rest of the world. Excess mortality is an indicator that takes into account the percent deaths above what would occur without a pandemic. It counts the excess mortality, and what we see is that we are 28% under Europe. You have to look at this holistically.
Okay.
Holistically.
Okay, so what she's talking about there...
You got to look at it holistically.
What she's talking about there is actually correct, actually. What she's talking about there, she's smart, Kayleigh McEnany. She knows exactly how much truth she needs to tell and how much she needs to hide to get out what she wants to get out there and to spin how she wants to spin. Now, what she's saying there is true, almost, in that excess mortality is a very sensible measure. Excess mortality says... is basically saying this is how many people have died more than you would expect this year. And so it takes into account everything. It's not about just who the hospitals happened to test when they died, people who died, homeless people who died, might have gotten COVID, people who didn't go to the hospital because the hospital was filled with COVID patients who then died of something else, really died because of COVID as well. So they're part of the mortality as well. So she says, you got to look at this holistically. You need to look at the total number of people who have died, how many more that is than previous years. And that's the excess mortality. She says, when you do that, America has 28% more excess mortality than Europe does. Sorry. Ooh, hang on. Other way around. America has 28% less excess mortality than Europe. So therefore, forget the death numbers. Don't worry about those COVID death numbers. And when you look it up holistically, America has fewer excess deaths than Europe does as a percentage of their deaths. So therefore, we're doing better than Europe.
Okay.
Now that is a very, very sensible and yet very wrong statistic. Right, so let me explain why. Because Trump's come on over the top and he's, in his Trump way, just making up a whole bunch of numbers. He said 4 times that Europe had recorded 40% more deaths than the US in excess mortality. He said twice it was 33%. Once he said 38%. Once he said 24%. Once he said 30%. 3 times he said 30%. Then he said 50% the very next day. Okay, so wonderful stats. But the thing is, most countries don't do excess deaths. America calculates excess deaths. Some European countries calculate excess deaths. Most countries don't. It's a hard statistic to calculate, okay? And there's about 4 or 5 different assessors out there who all have their own systems because there's no objective measure here, right? They've all got their own systems. And they all have different numbers and you can cherry pick whichever one you like. And no one knows because they're not very public. And so it's hard to check them up.
Okay.
Right? They're not very transparent what's going on here, right? Okay. The CDC also provides a range from a low figure to a high figure for America. So, of course, every number you hear from Kayleigh McEnany is the lowest possible figure, right? And depending on which one you pick, it would go from a range of 7% higher than Europe, just wait for now, higher than inverted commas Europe, to 28% higher than Europe. And
Fewer,
fewer, yes, right. 7% fewer to 28% fewer. And she, of course, picked the 28% fewer than Europe. Okay. It's not Europe. It's just the countries in Europe that provide excess death stats. There are 24 out of 44 European countries that provide excess death stats. Guess which countries they are? They're the countries that are obsessed with COVID. They're the countries that have the highest COVID rates. Okay, so what you're doing is you're comparing America's lowest possible result, which is what Kelly McEnany's cherry-picked, and comparing it to the half of the countries in Europe that have been decimated by COVID. That is what you are doing, right? Apart from that, it's the perfect usage of statistics. So if you want to know the actual number, I will tell you that there has been the European Mortality Monitoring Project have no skin in this game, and they have worked out a number that, according to them, from February to September, the excess deaths in Europe have increased this year by 12%, and the excess deaths in America have increased by 19%. Okay, so America's not blowing Europe away. We know Europe hasn't dealt very well with COVID either, but America is comfortably above Europe.
Well, it's 50% more.
That's right.
That's
right.
a lot.
I know. So I'm just saying. So the next time you hear excess deaths, don't go, that's a rubbish. No, it's actually a very legitimate measure if you do it accurately, but they're not doing it accurately. So there you go.
Yeah, and again, it's another thing because America prides itself on having these higher standards, and of course, it's been hollowed out for a long time in healthcare, among many other things. So that's a very dispiriting thing to hear.
It is. Do you have anything else to add, Bill, before?
No, I don't, but I found this very edifying.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I learned a lot.
I always learn a lot whenever I sit in front of this microphone. I always learn that I don't know as much as I think I do. Thank you so much for waiting. Honestly, this is like 9:22. We just finished this. I don't know when we're going to get this up. I'm going to get this up now, and I'm sorry for the people who stayed up for this because I advertised it on the show. And so you're going to stay up. Some of you poor suckers will stay up for it. I apologize in advance, but thank you very much for those guys who did listen. Thank you so much, Bill. I look forward to speaking to you again.
It was so much fun. I got so much great feedback from last time too. You have a lot of fans out there.
Excellent. Tell us your Twitter handle one more time.
Oh, you can find me on Twitter either at Hitsville or at HitsvilleOz, O-Z, Hitsville Oz.
Fantastic. And we actually have a Twitter account now on this. And I don't even remember what it is. I should look it up. I told you I didn't prepare.
Jeez.
I think it might be.
This is a professional operation. Well, no, because the whole Twitter stuff, it's a newfangled kind of thing.
It's very cutting edge.
You're learning about all that now.
Yeah,
that's good.
It's definitely just at Pep with Chaz.
Is it at Pep, Chaz, and Dave? I think it's at Pep, Chaz, and Dave with no spaces or hyphens or anything like that. I think, but I might correct myself next week. I'm so sorry. And I've got a new laptop, which means I can record podcasts from overseas. So that might be interesting down the track. Hopefully we'll see what we do there. Thank you very much. I will see you later, and I will see you later. Bye-bye.